The most important person in this world is my daughter. You are so much more. You are so much more than even you know.
The most important person in this world is my daughter. Those were Christina Applegate's own words. Simple, heartfelt, and filled with the kind of love that makes life worth living. But behind those words, behind the smile that millions remember, lies a story far darker than most of her fans could ever imagine. Today, Christina Applegate stands at the edge of a life she never thought she'd face. Her final TV role is complete. Her last movie has been canceled. The woman who made millions, laugh for decades, can no longer work. Not because she lost the passion, not because Hollywood forgot her, but because a disease has ravaged her body and stolen her strength. But as devastating as this chapter may be, her illness is not the whole story. In fact, it isn't even the most shocking part of her life. The truth about Christina goes back decades, to her earliest years in Hollywood. Years filled with childhood performances, family sacrifices, and opportunities that came at a heartbreaking cost. The scandal isn't just about what's happening to her now. It's about what happened then, long before anyone called her a star. Behind the lights, the laughter, and the scripts was a child learning to survive a world full of predators, pressure, and impossible expectations. Her upcoming memoir promises to pull the curtain back on everything, the abuse, the secrets, the choices she never should have had to make. And when it's released, it may shock even her biggest fans. Christina Applegate has always seemed like the kind of celebrity who grew up in front of us without scandal, the funny, charming teenager who turned into a versatile actress, then a strong mother, admired for her honesty and resilience. But the truth is far messier than anyone believed. What the world saw was the surface. A girl on a sitcom, a young woman in quirky comedies, a familiar face at award shows. What the cameras didn't capture were the nights of loneliness, the eating disorders, the way Hollywood treated children like currency instead of human beings. Christina wasn't just acting, she was surviving. From the time she was only months old, Christina was thrown into a world where appearances mattered more than childhood. She wasn't old enough to talk, yet she was expected to perform. She wasn't old enough to understand money, yet she carried the weight of helping her single mother make ends meet. And she wasn't old enough to protect herself, yet she was forced to navigate the dangers that every young girl in Hollywood eventually encounters. The memoir Christina is preparing to release isn't just another celebrity autobiography filled with funny stories and backstage gossip. It's something much darker. It promises to expose the trauma that defined her earliest years, the predators who circled, the pressure to stay thin, the damage inflicted when adults failed to protect her. For decades, Christina buried these truths under jokes, under scripted lines, under the strength she showed in interviews. But no secret stays buried forever. Now, with her career cut short by illness, she no longer has a reason to stay silent. And for the first time, the world will see Christina not just as a star, but as a survivor of Hollywood's hidden cruelty. Christina Applegate was born on November 25, 1971, in Hollywood, California. For most children, a birthplace is just a location on a certificate. For Christina, it was destiny. Hollywood wasn't just where she was born. It was where she would grow up, where she would succeed, and where she would suffer. Her father, Robert Applegate, worked as a record producer. Her mother, Nancy Pretty, was a singer and actress. But if that sounds like the perfect setup for a Hollywood fairy tale, it wasn't. Shortly after Christina was born, her parents separated. The marriage didn't last, and Nancy was left to raise her daughter on her own. Nancy didn't come from wealth. She didn't have the luxury of staying home to raise Christina quietly. Instead, she juggled auditions, performances, and gigs wherever she could find them. Babysitters were a luxury she couldn't afford, and so Christina was with her almost everywhere: rehearsal rooms, sets, auditions. Before Christina could even walk, she was part of the business. At just 3 months old, she appeared with her mother on the soap opera Days of Our Lives. For most parents, bringing an infant to work would be unimaginable. For Nancy, it was survival. Sometimes, to keep Christina quiet or happy on set, she'd bribe her with M&Ms. At 5 months old, Christina filmed a commercial for Playtex baby bottles. She wasn't just cute, she was marketable. And from that moment, she became more than just a daughter. She became a working actress. Unlike most kids, her earliest memories weren't of toys, playgrounds, or cartoons. Instead, they were of cameras, stage lights, and waiting for someone to call action. Nancy tried to give her daughter love, but she also made choices that tied Christina's identity to performance. Nancy briefly dated musician Stephen Stills, who once gave Christina a guitar she kept for years. That guitar was more than just an instrument. It was a reminder that her life wasn't like other children's. She wasn't growing up in a normal neighborhood with normal routines. She was being raised inside the unpredictable, demanding world of show business. By the time she entered kindergarten, Christina was already a member of the Screen Actors Guild. Childhood wasn't something she experienced in the traditional sense. Childhood was something she performed. At 9 years old, Christina took her first steps into feature films. The project was strange, even by horror standards. The 1981 movie Jaws of Satan told the story of snakes possessed by the devil terrorizing a small Alabama town. Christina played the daughter of a local businessman. The movie was so obscure it barely registered with critics or audiences. But for Christina, it marked a turning point. She had officially transitioned from commercials and background appearances to speaking roles in films. From there, Christina moved steadily into television. Guest appearances on Charles in Charge and Silver Spoons gave her more exposure. By 1986, she won a Young Artist Award for her work in Heart of the City, proving she wasn't just another child performer. She had genuine talent. But while the public saw a rising young star, the reality behind the scenes was much darker. Fame at that age wasn't just about learning lines. It was about living under constant scrutiny. When Christina was only 8, a neighborhood boy called her fat. Just one word. But for Christina, that single insult left a wound that would never fully heal. It wasn't just teasing. It was the spark that ignited a lifelong battle with food, weight, and self-worth. By the time she was 15, she was on the verge of stardom. That was when she landed the role that would define her career. Kelly Bundy on Fox's new sitcom Married with Children. But even as her career skyrocketed, her personal struggles deepened. Her mother enrolled her in Weight Watchers, convinced that thinness equaled success. Christina didn't just diet. She stopped eating properly altogether. Some days, she would survive on just 5 almonds. If she ate 6, she would cry and stay home, convinced she had ruined everything. Nancy didn't see the damage she was doing. When Christina dropped to 110 pounds, her mother didn't ask if she was okay. She simply asked, "How'd you do it?" To the world, Christina was a beautiful blonde teenager with a sharp comedic edge. To herself, she was a girl at war with her own body, already drowning in the pressures of Hollywood's impossible standards. Her childhood wasn't one of innocence. It was one of survival, survival against the industry, against judgment, and against herself. In 1987, Christina Applegate became a household name. At just 15 years old, she was cast as Kelly Bundy, the dim-witted but lovable daughter in Fox's boundary-pushing sitcom Married with Children. The show was unlike anything else on television. Crude, irreverent, and unapologetically outrageous, it quickly became both controversial and popular. Fox was a fledgling network at the time, but Married with Children helped it grow into a serious competitor to ABC, CBS, and NBC. Christina's performance as Kelly Bundy turned her into an icon. Her one-liners, often dubbed Kellyisms, became fan favorites. She played the stereotypical dumb blonde with such charm and comedic timing that it was impossible not to laugh. Audiences adored her. She was funny, bold, and magnetic. But while Christina's career flourished, her personal life deteriorated. Off-screen, the pressure to maintain her figure was relentless. She became obsessed with being thin, terrified that any weight gain would cost her the role that defined her. She was barely eating, but no one around her seemed to notice or care. For Christina, Kelly Bundy was both a blessing and a curse. The role brought her fame, money, and recognition. But it also cemented an image that she struggled to escape for years. Directors and casting agents often saw her only as Kelly, the blonde bombshell, the joke, the pretty face. Yet Christina had ambitions far beyond sitcom punchlines. She wanted to prove she could be more than a stereotype. And in 1991, she got her chance. That year, she starred in her first major film, Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. The movie was supposed to catapult her from TV star to big-screen actress. But things didn't go as planned. Christina Applegate may have looked like the picture of success, but beneath the surface, she was unraveling. From the outside, she was the glamorous Kelly Bundy, confident, sharp, and adored by millions. But in her private life, she was fighting an invisible war that consumed her for decades. The roots of her struggle went back to childhood. That single insult from a neighborhood boy calling her fat became a voice in her head that never stopped echoing. By the time she was 15, Hollywood amplified that insecurity 100-fold. Executives, casting directors, even her own mother, placed her under a microscope, judging her worth by the number on the scale. Christina became obsessed with food and weight. She restricted everything she ate, convincing herself that control over her body was the only way to keep control of her. Career, 5 almonds. That was all she allowed herself some days. Not 6. 6 meant failure. 6 meant shame. 6 meant tears and isolation. Her mother Nancy didn't recognize the signs of an eating disorder. When Christina's weight plummeted, Nancy didn't ask about her daughter's health. Instead, she marveled at the number. "How'd you do it?" she asked, as if Christina had discovered some miraculous secret. For Christina, it wasn't a secret. It was torture. The pressure to be perfect didn't stop with Married with Children. Every photo shoot, every interview, every red carpet event reminded her of the impossible standards Hollywood demanded. She wasn't just expected to be funny. She was expected to be flawless. But no one knew. Christina hid it well. On screen, she was vibrant, alive, brimming with comedic energy. Off screen, she was crumbling. For years, she never admitted the truth. Not to fans, not to colleagues, not even to herself. It wasn't until 2024, decades after the height of her career, that she finally broke the silence. On her podcast with fellow actress Jamie Lynn Sigler, Christina confessed the depth of her eating disorder. She described the relentless obsession with thinness, the desire to see her bones, the shame that followed every bite. Even now, she struggles with her reflection. She sometimes avoids mirrors altogether, leaving notes on the glass to remind herself not to spiral into self-criticism. Christina's story is proof that fame doesn't shield anyone from pain. In fact, sometimes it makes the pain worse. She wasn't just battling her own mind, she was battling an industry that thrived on impossible beauty standards. The Kelly Bundy role made her famous. But the cost was invisible, and it was enormous. After years of success on television, Christina Applegate hoped to break into film. Her first big opportunity came in 1991 with Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. She was only 19, still working on Married with Children, and saw the movie as a distraction rather than a passion project. In fact, she didn't even want to do it. At the time, Christina admitted she felt superior to commercial films. She carried herself with an attitude she later called arrogant and immature. "I was a freaking asshat," she confessed years later. When the film was released, her doubts seemed justified. It opened at number 6 at the box office, earning just $4.2 million in its first weekend. By the end of its run, it had only grossed $25 million, a modest sum that failed to impress critics or cement her as a movie star. But something unexpected happened. Over time, audiences found the movie on VHS and cable reruns. Slowly, it transformed. From a box office disappointment into a cult favorite. Fans loved her performance, even if critics didn't. This pattern would follow Christina throughout her career. Time and again, she would give performances that resonated with audiences, even when Hollywood didn't seem to value her as much as it should have. Breaking free from the Kelly Bundy stereotype wasn't easy. Casting directors continued to see her as the dumb blonde, even though Christina knew she had range. She fought hard to be taken seriously in roles that showed her depth, her drama, her vulnerability. Some projects succeeded, others fell flat. But Christina kept pushing, determined to prove she was more than just one character. Her career was filled with highs and lows. She starred in beloved comedies, appeared in critically acclaimed series, and delivered performances that earned respect from peers. Yet she also faced rejection, typecasting, and the unrelenting pressure of being a woman in Hollywood. Every time she stumbled, Christina got back up. But the struggle to reinvent herself never really went away. Hollywood has a way of locking actors into boxes, and escaping those boxes takes years, sometimes decades. Christina never stopped trying. She built a career that spanned television, film, and stage. But each success was accompanied by quiet battles, with her health, with her image, and with an industry that never made things easy. As the years went on, Christina Applegate carved out a respectable career beyond Kelly Bundy. She appeared in films like Anchorman, played memorable roles on television, and eventually landed in the critically acclaimed Netflix series Dead to Me. Dead to Me marked a new era for Christina. It was raw, emotional, and showcased her as more than just a comedic actress. Fans loved it, critics praised it, and Christina seemed to have found her footing again. But behind the success was another devastating secret. In 2021, Christina revealed that she had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a disease that attacks the central nervous system and gradually strips away mobility and independence. For a woman who had spent her life performing, the diagnosis was shattering. Suddenly, the stage, the sets, the red carpets, all the places that had defined her life were no longer accessible in the same way. Christina pushed through as long as she could, finishing the final season of Dead to Me even as the disease worsened. But after that, everything changed. Her last TV role was complete. Her next movie was canceled. The career she had built for nearly 5 decades was abruptly over. Fans mourned the loss of her artistry, but for Christina, it was more personal. Acting wasn't just a job, it was her identity, her escape, her survival. Without it, she had to face her life and her pain in ways she had never done before. Multiple sclerosis doesn't just end careers. It changes lives completely. Christina now lives with the daily challenges of a body that no longer obeys her, a future filled with uncertainty. Yet through it all, she clings to the one thing that has always mattered most: her daughter. For Christina, the end of her career is heartbreaking, but it is not the end of her story. With her acting career behind her, Christina has turned to something new: telling the truth. Her upcoming memoir promises to reveal everything the public never knew: the trauma, the abuse, the predators, the choices she was forced to make as a child in Hollywood. It isn't a book of gossip. It isn't about petty feuds or light-hearted stories from set. It's about survival. For decades, Christina buried her pain. She smiled through interviews, joked through talk shows, and hid behind the characters she played. But now, with nothing left to lose, she is ready to confront her past. The book is expected to expose the darkest parts of her childhood, the adults who failed her, the predators who targeted her, the self-destruction she endured to meet Hollywood standards. Fans who think they know Christina will likely be shocked. But Christina isn't writing this for shock value. She's writing it because silence nearly destroyed her. And by sharing her story, she hopes to break the cycle for others. Hollywood is filled with stories of young actors exploited and discarded. Christina's memoir will be another chapter in that painful history, but one told with raw honesty and courage. When it's released, it will not just redefine how people see her. It will force audiences to reconsider the industry itself. Christina Applegate's life has never been simple. She was born into Hollywood, raised by it, and nearly destroyed by it. From commercials as a baby to sitcom fame as a teenager, from cult classics to award-winning performances, her career has been extraordinary. But the real story isn't about the roles she played. It's about the battles she fought, the eating disorder that consumed her youth, the typecasting that limited her opportunities, the illness that ended her career, and most of all, the secrets she carried for decades. Christina isn't just an actress. She is a survivor. A survivor of an industry that demands too much and gives too little. A survivor of pain that most people will never understand. And yet, through it all, she has remained honest, raw, and human. She may no longer stand under the spotlight, but her story is more powerful than any script. When her memoir is released, it will not be the tale of a fallen star. It will be the truth about a woman who endured, who suffered, who survived. Christina Applegate may have lost her career, but she has found her voice, and for the first time, the world is finally ready to hear it. For someone who grew up surrounded by cameras and scripts, Christina Applegate's personal life was never truly private. Her relationships, whether fleeting romances or long-term commitments, were often scrutinized by the press, dissected by tabloids, and judged by audiences who thought they knew her. But behind the headlines was a woman who struggled to find real love in a world built on illusion. In her 20s, Christina dated fellow celebrities, navigating the kind of high-profile romances that magazines loved to print. There were moments of glamour, public appearances, where she looked radiant on the arm of a famous partner. But those relationships were not always filled with happiness. Fame has a way of distorting intimacy, turning personal connections into public spectacles. In 2001, Christina married actor Jonathan Shaich. From the outside, it looked like a Hollywood love story. But behind closed doors, the marriage was far from perfect. After just a few years, the cracks began to show. The couple separated in 2005 and finalized their divorce in 2007. For Christina, it was a painful lesson in the difference between appearance and reality, but life had something better waiting. In 2013, she married musician Martin Lenoble, a man who offered her the kind of quiet support she had been searching for. Their bond was different from the flashy relationships of her past. Martin stood by her through the darkest moments, through cancer, through her MS diagnosis, through every storm that life threw her way.